When it comes to PC gaming digital storefronts or launchers, there are the big three, right? There's Steam, there's Epic Launcher or Epic Game Store, and there's GOG. Now, what sets GOG apart is that CD Projekt Red, or CD Projekt, the group, the company that owns and created the store, they are pushing for this idea of a DRM-free storefront. So when you buy PC games on GOG, you download the installer, you install the game, and then that's that. You never have to check in online again. And there's just a sense of security knowing that it really does feel like you own the game as long as you have the installer. You know, there's just no need for any sort of online connection. And so you can just take that file anywhere, install it where you please. And it's just a good reason, a good incentive for people to buy games on GOG instead of other storefronts that usually enforce some kind of DRM. But GOG has been facing a bit of backlash lately because of what they did with Hitman. This is a game that was recently listed on GOG. It's $60 right now, and it's explicitly stated right here that the game is DRM-free, no activation or online connection required to play. And this is something to keep in mind when looking at the review score here, the user review score of 1.3 out of 5 stars, which is a pretty abysmal rating. And people might be wondering what's going on here. Hitman is a pretty damn good game. Well, here's the thing. Hitman is inherently a game that has DRM elements. While you can play the core game without logging in online, if you want to actually make progression and unlock stuff, that does require an internet connection. The game requires you to check in. And that's where the issue lies with this game, as GOG is known to be a storefront that is all about DRM-free, and it is advertised that this Hitman game that has been listed on this storefront is DRM-free, except it really isn't. I mean, technically, in terms of can you actually play the game, yes, but it's just the shell of the game. If you don't experience the progression of Hitman, then it's really not the full game. And so people are putting that out in the reviews, online DRM. This game has online DRM. You can play through the game with the basic options, but many features such as unlocking weapons, items, outfits, starting locations, and more are locked behind an online requirement. And these elements are all huge components of the replayability factor of Hitman. The GOG page does not make this clear, and it is extremely misleading. Here's somebody else. The only worthwhile AAA stealth game in years, so long as you disable hints and X-ray vision, but over 5 years later, IO still refused to implement a proper offline mode, so bare minimum, you don't need to be online to unlock new equipment, starting locations, outfits, etc. In other words, playing the game offline means you never unlock new content, and you'll have to start with a default loadout of a regular suit and silenced pistol, always. Now, there are certain online requirements in Hitman that make sense, especially the online missions that keeps track of, how well you did and all that. But in terms of basic aspects like unlocking weapons, outfits, starting locations, stuff that's confined to the single player experience, that's kind of artificially requiring an online connection, that's where people have qualms with this game, especially if it's on GOG and hosted on GOG under the guise of this being a DRM-free game, which it isn't, so it's just not a good look for this storefront. And it'd be one thing if there was explicit warning on the listing of this game on GOG that it is not DRM-free, but the storefront explicitly says DRM-free, no activation or online connection required to play, when you do. Like, if you really want to play this game and experience the full range of content, you do. And then this review concludes with, this system was disgusting on its own, but to still have it years later and on goddamn GOG of all places shows how utterly lazy IO are at this point. Fix your shit. Here's a shorter review that simply says 90% of the game is locked behind pointless DRM. This game doesn't belong here, etc. If you read through these reviews, they express about the same sentiments. And these are user reviews with high approval rates. So, for example, this is rated as the most helpful review. 1,540 of 1,616 users found this review helpful. Scrolling down here, 1,137 of 1,198 found this helpful. So, a high percentage of people agree. And this is an issue that also gained traction on Reddit. So this is a post on subreddit Crackwatch that kind of talked about all of this. But staff at GOG made a bad situation worse with the way they responded. As the headline states here, GOG staff is removing bad reviews for Hitman 2016, criticizing the DRM on their supposedly DRM-free store. As news of Hitman's lower rating began to spread, we actually got a response from someone from the GOG team who said this: "Dear GOG community, thank you for bringing this topic to our attention in regards to how this is not actually a DRM-free game despite it being advertised as such. We are looking into it and will be updating you in the coming weeks. In case you have purchased Hitman and are not satisfied with the released version, you can use your right to refund the game. At the same time, while we're open for meritful discussion and feedback, we will not tolerate review bombing and will be removing posts that do not follow our review guidelines." And the community took great qualms with CD Projekt and GOG labeling this situation as review bombing. While yes, there has been a flood of negative reviews, what these reviews point out is related to a technical element of the game that was misadvertised. And so the argument that's being made by a significant portion of the community is this isn't review bombing when people have genuine criticisms and qualms and expressing that through the user review process that allows people to rate games based on, you know, the quality of the game and whether they got what was advertised, which in the case of Hitman on GOG, the DRM-free platform that advertised this as a DRM-free game, isn't the case. And the fact that this GOG staff member expressed things in this manner while threatening to remove posts that do not follow review guidelines just left a sour taste in people's mouths and escalated this situation. This goes doubly true when you read the FAQ on GOG's review guidelines and policies. There's a segment that reads, "Can I write a negative review?" And the response reads, "Yes, if you're unsatisfied with the game, e.g. the gameplay, graphics, in-game mechanics, and features, you're free to write a review and share your opinion with other GOG users as to why you do not recommend it." So as per their own policy, people are allowed to post negative reviews if they have genuine qualms, and Hitman not actually being a DRM-free game despite being advertised as such is a reasonable criticism, and yet GOG is threatening to remove reviews, which goes against their own policies, and it all just paints a very negative picture. Somebody expressed to the GOG staff member that it's not review bombing when the reviews give better information on what is actually locked behind online DRM than the game store page. We will not remove reviews like that, only those that are against our review guidelines. Perhaps what's being referred to is, going back to the FAQ page, there is a segment that reads, "What kind of content is considered unacceptable in a review? Your review should be about the game you're writing your review about, constructive and polite. Please refrain from using language that may be considered offensive, inappropriate, or abusive." If a review happens to be mainly just inappropriate language and just toxicity and death threats and stuff that isn't actually constructive, doesn't contribute anything to the conversation, then that being unacceptable is reasonable enough. But the impression that GOG gave off by releasing this statement is that this whole situation is considered review bombing, and that even people who are issuing constructive, even if harshly given, reasonable criticism will potentially have their post removed. That impression that they gave is what kind of pissed people off. Though from the looks of it, it doesn't look like they've removed tons of reviews en masse, as the overall rating is still at a low 1.3 out of 5, which is even lower than what outlets reported. I think yesterday it was at 1.4. So the review score has actually gone lower. So far we're not seeing any evidence of, review tampering or anything like that. But this statement did make it seem like GOG was grouping all negative reviews under the umbrella of review bombing, when a lot of these are reasonable enough and have a reason for giving the game, or this version of the game, a 1 star. They bought a product expecting the feature of DRM-free. They didn't get that. They felt cheated. And so, I kind of get where these folks are coming from. Now, as long as GOG is only removing those reviews that are actually not constructive and just say awful shit, that's fine. But if they start removing reviews en masse that only provide constructive, even if harsh, criticism about the nature of this game and how it doesn't adhere to what was advertised, then that's where things can get pretty problematic. Though so far, no signs of that, and at the very least, this clarification was made that the reasonable reviews will not be removed. Hopefully that stays the case. But yeah, this is a situation where I'm going to have to agree with a lot of the user reviews that are being constructive when it comes to the issue of false marketing. There's a very specific reason why people tend to shop on GOG, so when that marquee feature, DRM-free, isn't something that is a part of one of the new releases, and that release strictly says DRM-free when it really isn't so, and when there's no warning that this specific game maintains its DRM elements, then, you know, expect that you're going to get backlash from people in your community who know you for that one thing. It could be argued that Hitman doesn't belong in a platform like GOG unless IO Interactive loosens up the DRM so that the single player stuff and all of the progression can be done without having to connect online. Who knows whether that'll happen? According to the forum post here, we're looking into it and we'll be updating you in the coming weeks. So in the future, maybe we'll get an update for this game that will loosen the DRM elements on gameplay features that really shouldn't require DRM, but whether that happens or not remains to be seen. But this is a pretty old game. This is the first Hitman. It's not even Hitman 3, so I think IO could, at this point, loosen up the DRM on this, and if they're going to release it on GOG, you kind of have to. And just in general, single-player gameplay that has no chance of affecting other players should not be locked down, restricted to online connections in any way, shape, or form. That's what I believe in. That shouldn't be an inconvenience that's there when, you know, players bought this game and it's an isolated instance of the game that's confined to that single-player experience. So hopefully either, you know, GOG's listing here can reflect the actual nature of the game instead of just flat out saying DRM-free when that's not really the case, or they can work something out with IO so that DRM can be loosened to make this an experience that can reasonably be called DRM-free, but time will tell. So this is one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this Hitman GOG negative review situation. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.